Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Moose2006 and this is This Week in Gaming News. First up on the docket today is some news from Epic Games, specifically Fortnite, and they are needing to now pay about $500 million in fines and refunds. So we have a story here out of Polygon, and Fortnite maker to pay $520 million over child privacy violations, deceptive in-game purchases. If we look down, we'll see that Epic has been found to be guilty of violating COPPA, which is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act of 1998, and has been ordered to pay $245 million in refunds and then another $275 million in fines. And the FTC says this is the largest penalty that they have ever collected for someone violating these rules. So the FTC has said that they violated COPPA by a few different kind of nefarious acts, one of which was gathering kids' personal information without their parents' consent, their default settings that match children and teenagers with strangers that resulted in harassment, bullying, sexual coercion, and other harm. And then this kind of a additional point here where parents who wanted to have their children's personal information deleted had to go through too many hoops to have that done, and sometimes that wasn't even honored. There's more here from the FTC about the dark patterns that they'd established. Dark patterns just being sort of a way for developers or websites to sort of manipulate or coerce you into kind of down like their workflow that they want. So it says Fortnite's counterintuitive and consistent and confusing button configuration led players to incur unwanted charges based on the press of a single button, and it led to hundreds of millions of dollars in unauthorized charges. Therefore, now the refunds and the fines. And this really is something to sort of be aware of just for the general public, whether it's Fortnite or just you're on the internet. Dark patterns, you'll see them quite a bit. Even things like logging out, sometimes you'll see the log out button or the log out text might be lighter than the rest of the text or hidden in some way. But yeah, just color schemes, lightnesses, darknesses, and things just to sort of funnel you down the path that the product or the company wants you to go down. So just keep your eye on that out there. Now there has been some action on Epic Games' part now after all this, and sort of during all this, they have created cabined accounts that basically if you're under the age of 13, you no longer default to being able to go into matches with the communication turned on, and they won't be able to turn those on until they receive consent from the parents. Now here's maybe the most troubling aspect of this, and why I'm not going to read a lot of like the Epic Games side today, because they have some pretty good spin. They have some very nice words, like they often do in situations like this. We don't need to hear it because at the end of the day, they're a large corporation that got exactly what they wanted. They knew exactly what they were doing. So if we look at this, the FTC's news release said that Epic's own employees expressed their concerns about these default settings as far back as 2017. And Epic ignored more than 1 million user complaints and repeated employee concerns that huge numbers of users were being wrongfully charged. So even internally, they had people going, hey, like, this is wrong. These people are not meaning to buy these things. What's going on? And of course, magically 5 years later, once this lawsuit starts coming to an end, they start fixing things. So, good on the FTC once again, finally showing a little bite. Not finally, but showing a little bite here with some fines and refunds. Is it a lot of money compared to what Epic makes? No, I think I saw a stat that this is like 30 days revenue for Fortnite. I mean, they're not going to feel it, but at least they're changing things. And obviously this is good for the consumer. So that is some Epic Games news. Now moving on to a little more Microsoft Activision news. This is going to be happening a lot, I think, in the next 6 to 12 months. So interestingly, there have been 10 Call of Duty players, hashtag gamers, who are suing. They're launching their own lawsuit to stop the Microsoft Activision Blizzard. So, of course, last week we talked about the FTC doing it. Now these 10 players are going to try to do it themselves. And they say that this would give Microsoft far outsized market power in the video game industry. These 10 players, they say the acquisition would give Microsoft the ability to foreclose rivals, limit output, reduce consumer choice, raise prices, and further inhibit competition. And that's exactly kind of what I talked about last week on the gaming news, is that this is why we want to prevent monopolies, because once they have a monopoly, they can put in all these practices that they otherwise wouldn't be able to get away with if they have healthy competition. So we'll see if anything comes out of this. I mean, if the FTC can't do it, who knows what these folks can do, but we'll keep an eye on it. And now for something pretty gross and pretty frustrating. This is from the Competitions and Markets Authority. And what they did is they invited responses from the public with a deadline, and they received over 2,100 emails during the time that they had this public, these responses kind of invited, I guess. And this was all about the Microsoft Activision Blizzard. And here's the worst part. Of the 2,100 emails that they reviewed, almost 75% were in favor of the merger. And again, this is from the public. I was stunned that there would be that many people in favor of two huge corporations merging. I don't get it, but they do have some things here. So a couple points here in favor of the merger. These responders said in favor of the merger, Sony and Nintendo are stronger than Microsoft in console gaming, and the merger will help Microsoft to compete more closely against them. Microsoft doesn't need our help. Sony and Nintendo, they don't need our help. None of these corporations need our help. They're doing fine. We are little people. They don't need us to rally around them. This comment is so ridiculous that a public user would say this in favor of the merger. And then here was just another weird one. If you ever want to, I'll link this below. I always link these articles if you want to read all these bullet points here. I'm just hitting a couple of them because this one was also a little asinine. The merger, again, this is just public opinion in favor of the merger. They are claiming the merger will lead to more funding and higher quality games in the industry. It probably won't. There's no proof that that's going to happen. Now, it may be bigger bonuses for the CEOs. I mean, we've seen, 7-8 digit bonuses going to Bobby Kotick's and the like in the last few years. That's where I'm assuming this money goes to. And throwing more money at a game is great and leads to higher quality games. Obviously, you also need time. You can't just trust that this is going to magically make way better games just because now all of a sudden there's two huge it doesn't make sense to me. So I didn't like that comment. And then a couple comments against the merger. Thankfully, there's 25% of the people who I think got it right here. The merger would lead to consolidation and would set a harmful precedent in the gaming industry of acquiring large publishers rather than encouraging organic growth. And we're actually seeing this a lot in the last couple of years of just companies buying companies buying companies. And this is obviously the biggest one, which is why it's all the news. This would be the largest merger in gaming history, paving the way for a potential string of future acquisitions of publishers such as Take-Two, etc., thereby increasing concentration in the market. And again, just the more buyouts, the less competition, the less healthy competition. None of it is pro us, pro consumer. So, and then one last tiny story on this same front. Microsoft is claiming now that the FTC's lawsuit against the buyout is unconstitutional. Cue laugh track, I think. One of its core arguments is the FTC's approach to assessing the acquisition is unconstitutional. So yes, this is saying that it's not really the blocking it's the assessing of it is violating their Fifth Amendment right to due process. Sure, I mean I don't buy it. I feel like it's all under litigation and is getting its due process, but we'll see if there's ever any more statements. And then I did want to read this statement or this quote from the Microsoft president, Brad Smith. And I'm probably a little cynical on my interpretation of it, but let's see. Even with confidence in our case, we remain committed to creative solutions with regulators that will protect competition, consumers, and workers in the tech sector. And here's the sentence that really got me. As we've learned from our lawsuits in the past, the door never closes on the opportunity to find an agreement that can benefit everyone. Now, again, a little cynical here about all big companies like this, but to me that last statement says, we've done this before, we've been through enough lawsuits, we always get our way somehow. We'll get our way this time. And he's probably right. So let's move on from this, and we have one more short story about Meta, formerly known as Facebook. And Facebook, well, Meta, I think we can use them interchangeably still. They are now having to pay $725 million, so almost $750 million in the Cambridge Analytica settlement. And this is actually going way back to 2018. This was a huge story for about a week. And I think this, for me personally, I think this is when I first started thinking about getting rid of my Facebook. And it was only a few months later that I finally did. And this was really what started that thought process. And this was when it came out that Cambridge Analytica, this UK-based company, I believe, had scraped a lot of data from Facebook without user consent. So they could have scraped data of mine. I had never consented to my data being shared with anything or anyone outside of Facebook, and it was like a huge amount of data and a huge amount of users. So now they have to pay $725 million. I'm sure they made way more than that selling the data or whatever they did with it. Again, kind of like the other couple stories, it seems they usually make more money than they are then having to be fined with or against. That was a poorly worded sentence, but you know what I mean? Like, they usually come out ahead. And it seems like here they will come out ahead, and this will be a little slap on the wrist. This settlement is reportedly the largest ever to be achieved in a U.S. data privacy class action, and the most Meta has ever paid to resolve a class action lawsuit. So there you go. Meta has to pay a bit of money for just letting some other company come in and take all of our data without us knowing or without us consenting. So that wraps up sort of the corporate greed edition of today's gaming news. Let's move on to new releases for the week. In a really surprise drop yesterday, the much anticipated sequel to Golf Story dropped on Switch, and this is Sports Story. I played Golf Story way back when it came out, I think in 2017, right, about 5 years ago. Wonderful RPG, super fun, super unique, and this sequel, Sports Story, just launched yesterday unexpectedly out of nowhere, and I'm excited to play it. Next up is Coffee Shop Tycoon, went full released. This is a coffee shop management sim developed and published by Riff Studios. And lastly, Potion Craft is an alchemy and shop management sim developed by Nice Play Games and published by Tiny Build. And that's really about it this week. We're at the end of the year, so pretty light on the new releases. And that is going to wrap up our news and new releases for the week. Thanks so much for watching. Like, subscribe, comment below if you wish, and of course, have yourselves a very nice day.